So this is about theory of change. This is how to resist. Every organization that is trying to accomplish political objectives, they have a theory of change, whether or not they think of it in those terms or not, right? They have a sense of like how they're going to get from point A to B to C and accomplish the change they want to see in the world. And what we're going to talk about today is a framework to think about that. So you can kind of structure what you're doing and make sure that the tactics that you're using today are attached to the ends that you're seeking politically. So whenever you're talking about theory of change, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, what change do we want? What do we want to see in the world? Do we want to get somebody elected? Do we want to pass a bill? Do we want to create an organization? Do we want to make a better organization? Do we need resources to fund an organization? What change do you want to see in the world, right? And then you got to ask yourself, well, who has the resources to create that change, right? So if I want to pass a bill in the legislature here in Vermont, like we did with Steve, who has the resources to create that change? So we want to pass legislation, right? Who has the resources? What is the resource that would pass the bill? The legislators, right? They are the people that have the resource. They have the votes inside the state legislature. And feel free to shout it out, all right? They have the votes inside the state legislature that have the ability to create that change. And then you got to ask yourself, okay, well, what do they want? What are the people that have the resources that can give us the change we want? What is it that they want? So in the case of politicians, what is it that they want? They want to get reelected. They want votes in their district, right? They want positive coverage in the press. They want to avoid negative coverage in the press, right? So we think about what is it that they want? And then we ask ourselves, okay, what resources do we have that they want, right? So say you're not very good at press, right? And you know one of the things they like is good press. Well, that's not a resource we have, right? Maybe you don't know anybody at the local paper. You don't know how to get anything in the paper. But you probably know a lot of neighbors who all vote, right? So that would be a resource that you have that they need, that we want. And then you ask yourself at the end of the day, okay, how do we start from the resources that we have today, not the ones we'll have someday, you know? How do we go from the resources we have to what the people who can create the change want, to get them to use their resources to give us the change that we need? So I'm going to break this down in another way. This is what strategic organizing is, okay? Strategy is turning the resources that you have into the power that you need to create the change that you want. And you always need to be thinking in terms of resources, power, change. Because if you're not using your resources to create power, then you're not going to get the change that you want. If you're trying to achieve a change that you don't have the power or the resources to create, then it's not going to work, right? So how can you start with the resources you have right now today to create the power you need to create the change you want? And the good news is that the first step in any political activism, the first resource is commitment, right? It's just the commitment you have. You don't have to have a lot of money. You don't have to have, you don't have to be the smartest strategist in the world. You don't even need to have the best plan. The thing you can start with is commitment. And if you start with that resource, you can get other people who will give you their commitment. You can develop the power with them that you need to create the change that you want. So always be thinking in terms of resources, power, and change. And power is not something you have or you don't have, right? I can't sell you your power today. I can't be like, hey, can I get $10 of power? You know, that's not the way power works. Power is a relationship, okay? And there's two kinds of power relationships. One is when people have power over us, right? Who are some people who have power over us? Shout it out. Policemen, cops, elected officials, corporations, parents. You know, a lot of people say, you know, bosses, right? These are people that have power over us, right? But there's a different type of power relationship that, especially when we're talking about political organizing, that's really, really important. It's power with other people, right? So we create power by getting together in numbers of people and then trying to achieve change together. What's some examples of places where we have power with people? Feel free to shout it out.
Churches.
Churches. Unions. What's other examples? Friends. Voting booth. Nonprofits. Groups, you know, organizations that work in the public interest, right? So those are some examples of relationships that we have power with other people, right? And when we're organizing, a lot of times what we have to do is figure out how do we develop power with other people in order to kind of tip the balance and take the power back for people who have power over us, right? And this is where leadership comes in. This is one of the most important things I've learned in all my years of organizing. It's very simple, but it is incredibly important. Leadership is simply taking responsibility for enabling others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. I'm going to say it one more time. Leadership is taking responsibility for enabling others to achieve purpose in the face of uncertainty. And there's two parts to this. One is people, when you're running an organization, even if you're a volunteer, even if you're just a head volunteer at the office that day, they're going to bring you their uncertainty. They're going to be like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make these calls. I don't know how to get involved. I don't know where to sign up, right? They're going to bring you their uncertainty. And as a leader, what you need to be doing and thinking about is how do I give them purpose in exchange for their uncertainty? So people are going to come up, and this is how you're actually going to buy power together, okay? They're going to come up and they're going to say, hey, can I give you $10 of uncertainty? And you'll be like, sure. Can I sell you $10 of purpose? Right? That's what you're going to be thinking about, because your job as a leader is just to keep reminding them of the purpose of what we're doing. Why is it that we're here? What is it that we're trying to accomplish, right? And then the second part of that is about taking responsibility for enabling others. You can't be a leader of one, right? You have to take responsibility for the behavior of other people. It's one of the hardest things in management, is being responsible for the behavior of people you have no control over. So how are you going to get other people to take action with you? How are you going to take responsibility for that? That's your responsibility as a leader. So that comes to our case study. Back in the day, in the 1960s, there was a woman named Rosa Parks. She was actually a trained organizer. Did you guys know that? Who knew that? About half the room. Okay. So exactly. She went to a school where she studied how to be an effective organizer, similar to the training that you're going through today, talking about nonviolence and the way to create political change in the world. So when she got on that bus, she wasn't just some tired old woman. And in fact, somebody had already sat down on a bus before her and been arrested, but she was a little younger, didn't quite fit the profile. Rosa Parks was a very established woman in the community. People knew her, people respected her. And so when she sat down on that bus to protest segregation, they went that night, she gets arrested, they went that night at a church, and they said, okay, what we're going to do is for one day, just one day, we're going to protest the bus line. And nobody's going to use the buses tomorrow. That's it. That's all they asked for. It would be like me saying to you, hey guys, it's really important. I want everybody not to drive anywhere tomorrow. You can bike, you can walk, just don't drive tomorrow. And if we really needed to, if it would be really important, you could probably do that for me, right? Okay. But what if I came back to you for 367 days after that and said, I really need you to not drive your car, right? That would be really hard. But that is what they did. And day after day after day, for longer than a year, they didn't ride the buses, right? And they denied the owners of the bus lines their major source of income, right? And they had people pick up other people from, in their cars. People walked miles to work and home. People figured out ways to get around town, to do everything they needed to do, work with each other, power with each other, right? To figure out how they can circumvent the bus system. And eventually they won that fight. And they desegregated the buses, and people were able to sit wherever they wanted on the bus. And this contributed a major victory, as I'm sure you all know, in the civil rights movement. So what I want to ask is, what was the change that Rosa Parks wanted when she went and sat down on that bus? Shout it out. Desegregation, right? Freedom, right? So who had the resources? Tell me the specific thing they wanted. Desegregation of what? Of the buses. So who had the power, the resources, to give her that change? The bus owners, right?
Bus owners.
Okay. So what did they want? What do the bus owners want? They want money. They want the fares, right? Okay. So what did Rosa Parks and her friends in that community have that they wanted? Their fares. Okay. So then they took that resource and they aggregated it collectively, and then they pulled it away, non-violently. They didn't go and have signs and protest on the street corner and try and educate more people and hand out flyers. I've done a ton of that myself, right? Started out in politics doing that. Done a lot of protests with signs. But what they thought about was, what is the resource we have that we can use to get the change we need from the people who have it? And then they applied their commitment to it, right? And commitment stacked upon commitment, multiplied by each other times 368 days. That's what got them the change that they needed. So what are some of the sources of our power in the resistance? Working in progressive activism, political activism, whatever it is you do, whatever group you're involved with, what are some of the sources of our power? Right now, I would say we have 6 million Americans who showed up for the Women's March, right? I was there in Washington, D.C. I'm sure many of you were, or in your local communities at the Women's March. Literally the largest demonstration in human history. 6 million, I think, were in America, and then there was 9 million throughout the world. And this number is really important. And I'm going to tell you why later on, but I just want you to remember 6 million. And think about what percentage of the population that is. Because the good news is that we're almost there. We almost got what we need to win. The next thing we have is organizing technology. We literally have some of those powerful tools that organizers have ever had in the history of the world in order to create political change. We have the internet, right? And all the tools that people are creating to use the internet to connect with each other. Action Network, which is the underlying technology of Indivisible and Women's March and Daily Kos and a lot of different organizations, is great technology. It's literally the technology that the AFL-CIO has, the National Labor Union, given to a startup activist organization that says, I just want to make a group, right? You now have that ability to connect in that way. We have email, we have Facebook, social media, has its drawbacks, but we can connect to a lot of people and get the word out that way, right? So we have a lot of really powerful technology. And then we have resistance leaders like you. So the people that have joined the Women's March Indivisible, people that have been affiliated with groups in your local community for years. Maybe some of you are just starting to get involved in activism for the first time, right? And deciding to take responsibility for getting other people involved as well. This is enough to win right here, right? These are the sources of our power. And if we take all this and we would array it strategically, if we would do strategic organizing with the resources that we have right now today, we would win this fight. Trump would be gone within a year. I'm very confident of that fact. And then we could go on to creating the world that we want to see. So, okay, so a lot of times with the goals that we have in politics, the people that got to make those decisions that have the resources that we need, they're politicians. But the good news is that I used to work for politicians at the state legislative level. I've elected people to Congress. I've elected people that now sit in the United States Senate. And I can tell you pretty much across the board at every level of government, they're all pretty simple creatures. No offense, Steve. I should change it to "this is Steve." That'd be hilarious. So this is Bill, right? Bill's a politician. This is a carrot and a stick, right? So when you're thinking about politicians, I want you to think about carrots and sticks, right? Because it's kind of simple math, addition and subtraction. So the things that Bill wants, the carrots that Bill wants, is he wants support, right? In whatever form that means. He wants constituent feedback. It's the reason that politicians do so much polling. They actually want to know what their constituents think, right? They want to hear from you. They want phone calls. They want letters, especially thank you calls go a long way. They want feedback from the people. And then at the end of the day, of course, we all know they want votes in their district so they can keep their position of power and keep doing what they see as good in the community, right? Those are the carrots. The sticks are things like electoral opposition, right? And especially in primaries. Like most of the seats throughout the country, Congress, state legislature, otherwise, they're all gerrymandered, right? So they're really safe seats. So it almost seems like there's this impenetrable wall we can't get into. But the reality is that makes primaries really easy, right? Because a lot of times you have people serving in like a very left-leaning district, but they're a very moderate acting legislator, right? Or they're working on behalf of corporate interests instead of the people's interests. So what they fear most is primaries. And that becomes really important, especially in a state like Vermont. They don't want controversy and bad press, right? If you can create a stir in the local community and they're getting a whole bunch of phone calls saying, hey, why did you do this? Even 10 phone calls, 20 phone calls can go a very long way. That's about how many calls they get on the budget sometimes. I'm sure Steve can tell you. They don't get too many calls, right? So if you get 20 calls in, 30 calls in, if everybody in this room called about something today, you definitely get their attention, especially if those calls are originating from inside the district. And then they don't want bad press, right? So an op-ed in the paper, right? They're obsessive about seeing their name in print. So if they see their name and it's bad, it's like they're paying attention, right? So that's one way to get their attention. Or do a protest at their office if they won't give you a meeting. Make sure the press shows up. Now you've got their attention because they look really bad in the paper. Maybe they'll sit down and have a meeting with you. So those are some of the carrots and sticks. There's a lot more than that. But those are some of the best carrots and sticks you can use to get Bill and politicians like Bill to do stuff, right?
I didn't get why they fear primaries.
That's okay. So the reason they fear primaries is, say I live in a district where about 80% of the people vote Democratic, or just one way or the other, right? I know that anybody that runs against me in the general is never going to win. So whoever wins the primary, let's say that 60% of people vote in the general election, but only 10% of people vote in the primary, right? That's a few hundred or a few thousand votes, right? So if somebody runs against me in the primary, then it's only a very small amount of votes that they need in the primary election, in their own primary election. Yeah. So if you run in their primary election, you only need a very small number of votes, and a lot of times they don't even know how to run campaigns because they've either been there so long and never run a campaign, or they might have even been appointed to their position, or they don't really run real campaigns. So a lot of the knowledge that you all have from working on Obama's campaign or Clinton's campaign or Bernie's campaign, you apply that in a local state legislative district, and you'll mop the floor with them, and they know that. So sometimes if you want to get somebody to do something, one of the best ways is just to be like, you know, if you don't do this, then I'm going to run against you. And I have these 30 people with me to help me knock on doors. And they'll be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll take another look at that bill, you know? Okay, great. So when we want to create a shift in power, remember there's the power over us, right? And then there's the power with us. When we want to create that power shift, what we have is agents of change. You in this room are agents of change. You're taking, you know, a holiday, a day off, to come here and figure out how you can be an effective political organizer. You're an agent of change. You're already taking action. On the other side, there's defenders of the status quo. A lot of these people sit in boardrooms of corporations. A lot of people sit in the state legislature. A lot of the people that sit in the state legislature that wear, you know, the blue or red cap, whichever one you affiliate with, they're all defenders of the status quo, right? Things are going just fine for them, okay? And then in the middle of that, between us, there's this political battlefield. And it's like, it's empty right now. It's like an empty football field, right? There's our goal line and their goal line. But in this game, the people who win the game, the people that score the most points, are the people who get the most people off the sidelines to come join them in taking action, right? Because we can't just win with the 30 people in this room, right? We need to get people off the sidelines. We need to call into their local communities. You know, let's say there's some, you know, Senator Dick Sears, we need to get him to do something, right? But nobody here lives in his community. Well, how are we going to go into his community and find somebody that's on the sidelines, not doing anything right now, and get him to call Senator Sears like Steve Barry did, right? We got to get more people off the sidelines. And once you get more people off the sidelines and actually engaged in a political fight, that's when we have power with each other as organizers, but then organizers have power with the community, and we can overwhelm the opponents of change. We can overwhelm the defenders of the status quo, and that's how we create that power shift. Right? So always be thinking about how do we organize with each other, and then how do we go out and get more people and organize them off the sidelines to participate in change. And one of the best ways to do that is to inspire more leaders. You know, I'm not here today to make you followers of Ryan, or even followers of Americans Take Action, or even followers of the resistance. You all are leaders in the resistance, right? Because you're here today, and now it's your responsibility to go out and find other people that you can help them become leaders, right? Because you can take the things you learned today and inspire them to not just become followers, to not just do something tactically, but to do something strategically, right? How do you convey this information to them and help them think in this way? Because true leaders don't make people into followers, they make other people into leaders, right? And my favorite thing about politics is when a politician who's been opposing you for like months and months and months, right? And they've just like, they wouldn't give you that committee hearing, they wouldn't give you a vote, they wouldn't vote for you, they voted against you maybe in committee. But at the end of the day, they vote for it on the floor, and then when the paper calls, they're the one that gets quoted in support of it. It's my favorite. A lot of people get kind of upset. They're like, that guy totally didn't want to do what we did, and then he's taking credit for it. And I'm like, that's perfect, you know, because that means we won, right? Because this is how politics actually works, right? Here's us leading the charge, right? And there's the politicians behind it. Yeah, exactly. What they said, right? Because the truth is that every movement in America started with people like you seeking a change that they wanted to see in the world, and ended with politicians voting that way or giving us the change that we want, or boardrooms and corporations and CEOs giving us the change that we want. There is no movement in America that started with politicians, okay? So don't wait for them, because you're the leaders that we need. And when the people lead, the leaders will follow. They'll follow us, and then they'll take credit, and remember that's an awesome thing, because that means you won. So if we're going to get there, the first thing we have to start with is we have to imagine what victory looks like, right? So imagine you get into the DeLorean with Doc. Does anybody not get this reference? This is Back to the Future, okay? Get into the DeLorean with Doc, and he takes you into the future, right? And it's a time-traveling machine, okay? That's all you need, really. And you get into the future, and you step out, and you're like, what does the world look like? Because, you know, we organized, and we put our commitment in, we got other people to organize with us, we created other leaders in the community, we won. And 20 years from now, you get out of this time-traveling DeLorean, what does the world look like, right? That's the vision you need to keep in your mind, right? Because at the basis of purpose is a positive and unifying vision of the future, right? That's where purpose comes from. It's, I see this change I want to see in the world, I'm going to move towards it. A friend of mine is a cognitive linguist who I'll tell you about in the strategic communications session. But she says, you know, when you give people prevention of harm goals, right, and you say there's this harm in the world and we want to avoid it, people kind of like tense up, you know, and oh my God. Like in our conscious brain, it might even make sense. We're burning the planet down, okay? Like, it's a horrible thing. We should probably stop doing that. In your conscious mind, that makes sense. But in your animal mind, your reptilian mind, you're freaking out. You're like, oh my God, we're all going to die. So what your brain tells you is, okay, just stay where you're at. Because like right now where you're at, you're safe, you're breathing, you're good, right? So just don't move. Okay, so if we're creating a movement, it's probably a really bad idea to be telling people in the reptilian brain, don't move. That's a don't movement, okay? So on the other hand, what she says, and you know, she studied the structure of the brain. She says if you give people a positive and unifying vision of the future, if you say, hey, you know, the world, it's got some problems, but hey, think of a world where X, Y, and Z. Isn't that so much better? Can you picture that? What she says is that creates openness to change, right? And when you have that positive and unifying vision of the future, and they agree with you, people will then start moving towards it, right? So if we want to create a movement, what we need to do is have a positive and unifying vision of the future of the things we want to change in the world, right? Not just what we're against. You know, resisting Trump is really important. But what is a positive and unifying vision? What is it that we love in the world that we want to protect? What is it that we love in the world that we want to create for the people that we love, right? And if we focus on that, that's how we're going to be able to give people, bless you, that's how we're going to be able to give people purpose when they bring us their uncertainty. I don't know if I can make it, I'm just really tired, and I don't know if I can make these calls again. Every time I call, people yell at me. I know, I feel you, I've been there. I've been yelled at on the phone a lot, if you can imagine, in 2 decades of politics, right? But it's really important, because if we do this, then this will happen, and we will get this change. Are you with me? And that is the conversation of politics that we need to be having as leaders. So, we're going to do an exercise now, and we're going to start with our theory of change. And this is your theory of change, right? Not the group's theory of change. Think about your theory of change. What is it why is it that you're here? What change is it that you want to see in the world, right? What would be the best thing if you could get in that DeLorean with Doc, and there was just one thing that got changed in that time machine? What would it be? And then I want you to ask yourself, who has the resources to create that change? What do they want? Put yourself in their shoes, right? And a lot of times, I'll be honest, we put our shoes on other people, all right? Well, they want what we want. I don't know. What do they want? Put yourself in their shoes. And then say, what do we have that they want? So,
is a world about to change when tomorrow